rise up and we follow the path that we believe in. No, we're not gonna stop until we reach it. Oh, all you need to know is that we're holding on. We rise up from the dust and claim our throne. We rise up from the dust and claim our throne. We rise up from the dust and claim our throne.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started, shall we? All right, we are starting a new book tonight, The Secret History of the World, and I am going to start right off by showing you the cover of it. Let me get the book pulled up here first. There we go. And so it is The Secret History of the World by Mark Booth. That's in the U.S. In the U.K., he goes by a different name that I am blanking on right at the moment. And it's actually The Secret History of the World as laid down by the secret societies. Um, but yeah, if you're looking for it in the UK, it's under a different. It's not Mark Booth. It's under a different pen name, but it's the same guy, same book. Slightly different cover. I like that cover better. But anyway, there are a bunch of pictures as I flipped through the book a little bit. I can see, so I'll be showing those. And I thought I would go ahead and start with the introduction. It looked like it was interesting enough that I would want to do that. Oh, and here's our first, the frontispiece of Sir Walter Raleigh's The History of the World 1614. I'm going to go ahead and show you that. There it is, if you want to see it a little bit bigger. Interesting, this standing on the skeleton and the person. I don't know whether it's a live person or not. But yeah. All right, getting into our introduction. This is a history of the world that has been taught down the ages in certain secret societies. It may seem quite mad from today's point of view, but an extraordinarily high proportion of the men and women who made history have been believers. Historians of the ancient world tell us that from the beginnings of Egyptian civilization to the collapse of Rome, public temples in places like Thebes, Eleusis, and Ephesus had priestly enclosures attached to them. Classical scholars refer to these enclosures as the mystery schools. Here, meditation techniques were taught to the political and cultural elite. Following years of preparation, Plato, uh, Aeschylus, I don't know that name. I don't know how to pronounce that one. Sorry, it's Aeschylus. Alexander the Great, Caesar Augustus, Cicero, and others were initiated into a secret philosophy. At different times, the techniques used by these schools involved sensory deprivation, breathing exercises, sacred dance, drama, hallucinogenic drugs, and different ways of redirecting sexual energies. These techniques were intended to induce altered states of consciousness in the course of which initiates were able to see the world in new ways. Anyone who revealed to outsiders what he had been taught inside the enclosures was executed. Iamblichus, the Neoplatonist philosopher, recorded that what happened to two boys who lived at Ephesus. One night, lit up by rumors of phantoms and mystical practices of a more intense, more blazingly real reality hidden inside the enclosures, they let their curiosity get the better of them. Under cover of darkness, they scaled the walls and dropped down the other side. Pandemonium followed, audible all over the city, and in the morning the boys' corpses were discovered in front of the enclosure gates. In the ancient world, the teachings of the mystery schools were guarded as closely as nuclear secrets are guarded today. Then, in the 3rd century, the temples of the ancient world were closed down as Christianity became the ruling religion of the Roman Empire. The danger of proliferation was addressed by declaring these secrets heretical, and trafficking in them continued to be a capital offense. But as we shall see, members of the new ruling elite, including church leaders, now began to form secret societies. Behind closed doors, they continued to teach the old secrets. This book contains an accumulation of evidence to show that an ancient and secret philosophy that originated in the mystery schools was preserved and nurtured down the ages through the medium of secret societies, including the Knights Templar and the Rosicrucians. Sometimes this philosophy has been hidden from the public, and at other times it has been placed in plain view, though always in such a way as to remain unrecognized by outsiders. To take one example, the frontispiece of The History of the World by Sir Walter Raleigh, published in 1614, is on display in the Tower of London. Thousands file past it every day, missing the goat's head hidden in its design and other coded messages. If you've ever wondered why the West has no equivalent to the tantric sects on open display on the walls of Hindu monuments, such as the temples of Khajuraho in central India, you may be interested to learn that an analogous technique, the Kabbalistic art of Kareza, is encoded in much of the West's art and literature. We will see, too, how secret teachings on the history of the world influence the foreign policy of the present U.S. administration regarding Central Europe. What is the, when he means present, what does he mean? I don't know when this was published. Copyright 2008. Okay. This edition first published. So I don't know when the first edition was, but this edition is 2008. Okay. So now we know what he means by current U.S. Administration. Is the Pope Catholic? Well, not in the straightforward way you might think. One morning in 1939, a young man aged 21 was walking down the street when a truck drove into him and knocked him down. While in a coma, he had an overwhelming mystical experience. When he came round, he recognized that, although it had come about in an unexpected way, this experience was what he had been led to expect as the fruit of techniques taught him by his mentor. This is a tough name. Mixla Kotlorezik, a modern Rosicrucian master. As a result of this mystical experience, the young man joined a seminary, later became Bishop of Krakow, then later still Pope John Paul II. Interesting. These days, the fact that the head of the Catholic Church was first initiated into the spirit realm under the aegis of a secret society is perhaps not as shocking as it once was, because science has taken over from religion as the main agent of social control. It is science that decides that it is acceptable for us to believe, what it is acceptable for us to believe, and what is beyond the pale. In both the ancient world and the Christian era, the secret philosophy was kept secret by threatening those who trafficked in it with death. Now, in the post-Christian era, the secret philosophy is still surrounded by dread, but the threat is of social death rather than execution. Belief in key tenets such as prompting by disembodied beings, or that the course of history is materially influenced by secret cabals, has been branded as, at best, crackpot, at worst, the very definition of what it is to be mad. In mystery schools, candidates wishing to join were made to fall down a well, undergo trial by water, squeeze through a very small door, and hold logic chopping discussions with anthropomorphic animals. Ring a bell? Lewis Carroll is one of the many children's writers. Others are the Brothers Grimm, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, C.S. Lewis, and the creators of The Wizard of Oz and Mary Poppins, who have believed in the secret history and the secret philosophy. With the mixture of the topsy-turvy and the childlike literalness. Oh, we are in an ad. So I'm going to stop there, and I'll pick up right there. I wasn't quite through the paragraph, but that's okay. This will give me a chance. And what is our ad? Our ad is of the Tyson fight that's going on tonight. The Jake Paul Mike Tyson. And I am missing it because it's on Netflix and I don't do Netflix. But it'll be showing up on YouTube and elsewhere soon enough, so I'll see it. Not worried about it. All right. Now it says that we are back. So I'm going to pick up at the beginning of the sentence I was on. With a mixture of the topsy-turvy and childlike literalness, these writers have sought to undermine the common sense, materialistic view of life they want to teach children to think backwards, look at everything upside down and the other way around, and break free of established fixed ways of thinking. Other kindred spirits include Rabelais, 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 and Jonathan Swift. Their work has a disconcerting quality in which the supernatural is not made a big issue of. It is simply a given. Imaginary objects are seen as at least as real as the mundane objects of the physical world. Satirical and skeptical, these gently iconoclastic writers are undermining of readers assumptions and subversive of down-to-earth attitudes. Esoteric philosophy is nowhere explicitly stated in Gargantua and Pantagruel or Gulliver's Travels, but a small amount of digging brings it into the light of day. In fact, this book will show that throughout history, an astonishing number of famous people have secretly cultivated the esoteric philosophy and mystical states taught in the secret societies. It might be argued that because they lived in times when even the best educated did not enjoy all of the intellectual benefits that modern science brings, it is only natural that Charlemagne, Dante, Joan of Arc, Shakespeare, Cervantes, Leonardo, Michelangelo, Milton, Bach, Mozart, Goethe, Beethoven, and Napoleon all held beliefs that are discredited today. But then isn't it rather surprising that many in modern times have held the same set of beliefs, not just madmen, lone mystics, or writers of fantasies, but the founders of the modern scientific method, the humanists, the rationalists, the liberators, secularizers, and scourges of superstition, the modernists, the skeptics, and the mockers? Could the very people who have done most to form today's scientifically oriented and materialistic worldview secretly have believed something else? Newton, Kepler, Voltaire, Paine, Washington, Franklin, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Edison, Wilde, Gandhi, Duchamp. Could it be true that they were initiated into a secret tradition, taught to believe in the power of mind over matter, and that they were able to communicate with incorporeal spirits? Recent biographies of some of these personalities hardly mention the evidence that exists to show that they were interested in these sorts of ideas at all. In the present intellectual climate, where mention is made, they are usually dismissed in terms of a hobby, a temporary aberration, amusing ideas the personalities may have toyed with or used as metaphors for their work, but never taken seriously. However, as we shall see, Newton was undoubtedly a practicing alchemist all his adult life and regarded it as his most important work. Voltaire participated in ceremonial magic through all the years he dominated the intellectual life of Europe. Washington invoked a great spirit in the sky when he founded the city that would bear his name, and when Napoleon said he was guided by his star, this was no mere figure of speech. He was talking about the great spirit who showed him his destiny and made him invulnerable and magnificent. One of the aims of this book is to show that far from being passing fads or unaccountable eccentricities, far from being incidental or irrelevant, these strange ideas formed the core philosophy of many of the people who made history, and perhaps more significantly, to show that they shared a remarkable unanimity of purpose. If you weave together the stories of these great men and women into a continuous historical narrative, it becomes apparent again and again that at the great turning points in history, the ancient and secret philosophy was there, hiding in the shadows, making its influence felt. In the iconography and statuary of the ancient world, starting from the time of Zarathustra, knowledge of the secret doctrine of the mystery schools was denoted by the holding of a rolled scroll, as we shall see. This tradition has continued into modern times, and today the public statues of the world's towns and cities show how widely its influence is spread. There's no need to travel as far as sites like René de Chateau, Roslin Chapel, or the remote fastnesses of Tibet to find occult symbols of a secret cult. By the end of this book, the reader will be able to see that these traces lie all around us in our most prominent public buildings and monuments, in churches, art, books, music, films, festivals, folklore, in the very stories we tell our children, and even in the names of the days of the week. Two novels, Foucault's Pendulum and The Da Vinci Code, have popularized the notion of a conspiracy of secret societies that seeks to control the course of history. These novels concern people who hear intriguing rumors of the ancient and secret philosophy set themselves on the trail of it and are drawn in. Some academics, for example, Francis Yates at the Warburg Institute, Harold Bloom, Sterling Professor of Humanities at Yale, and Marcia Keith Suchard, Suchard, author of the recent groundbreaking Why Mrs. Blake Cried, Swedenborg, Blake, and the Sexual Basis of Spiritual Vision, have researched deeply and written wisely, but their job is to take a measured approach. If they have been initiated by men in masks, taken on journeys to other worlds, and shown the power of mind over matter, they are not letting on. The most secret teachings of the secret societies are transmitted only orally. Other parts are written in a deliberately obscure way that makes it impossible for outsiders to understand. For example, it might be possible to deduce the secret doctrine from Helena Blavatsky's prodigiously long and obscure book of the same name, or from the 12 volumes of G.I. Gurdjieff's allegory All and Everything, Beelzebub's Tales to his grandson, or from the 600 or so volumes of Rudolf Steiner's writings and lectures. 600 volumes? Jesus. Similarly, you might, in theory, be capable of decoding the great alchemical texts of the Middle Ages, or the esoteric tracts of high-level initiates of later periods, such as Paracelsus, Jacob Boehm, or Emanuel Swedenborg, but in all these cases the writing is aimed at people already in the know. These texts aim to conceal as much as they reveal. And then we do have a picture. Um, it just says statue of a Roman statesman. I'll show it to you just because I show all pictures, but it's just a picture of a statue. He is holding a scroll. Um, I don't see. Well, he is vaguely in the as above, so below. Um, that as above, so below kind of gesture, but I don't know. That's all I really see in it at first glance. All right. Oh, and we have another one on the very next page. Statue of George Washington by Sir Francis Chantry, engraving from 1861. I'll go ahead and bring that one up real quick so we can move on with the reading. So, an engraving of a statue from 1861. And he is in kind of a robe. Interesting. And again, sort of vaguely in the above, as above, so below gesture or position or whatever you want to call it. I have been looking for a concise, reliable, and completely clear guide to the secret teachings for more than 20 years. I have decided to write one myself because I am convinced that no such book exists. It is possible to find self-published books and websites that claim to do it, but like collectors in any field, those who browse in bookshops on a spiritual quest soon develop a nose for the real thing, and you only have to dip into these books and sites to see there is no guiding intelligence at work, no very great philosophical training, and very little hard information. I would assume that this guy has read The Secret Teachings of All Ages. Not saying that that is the be-all, end-all, or that it would answer his questions, but I am assuming he's probably read it. This history, then, is the result of nearly 20 years' research. Books such as Mysterium Magnum, a commentary on Genesis by the mystic and Rosicrucian philosopher Jacob Boehm, together with books by his fellow Rosicrucians, Robert Flood, Paracelsus, and Thomas Vaughan, have been key sources, as well as modern commentaries on their work by Rudolf Steiner and others. These are referenced in the notes at the back rather than considered in the main body of the text, for reasons of conciseness and clarity. But crucially, I have been helped to understand these sources by a member of more than one of the secret societies, someone who, in the case of one secret society at least, has been initiated to the highest level. I had been working for years as an editor for one of London's largest publishers, commissioning books on a wide range of more or less commercial subjects, and sometimes also indulging in my interest in the esoteric. In this way, I have met many leading authors working in the field. One day a man walked into my office who was clearly of a different order of being. He had a business proposition that we should reissue a series of esoteric classics, alchemical texts and the like, to which he would write new introductions. We quickly became firm friends and spent a lot of time together. I found I could ask him questions about more or less anything, and he would tell me what he knew. Amazing things. In retrospect, I think he was educating me, preparing me for initiation. On several occasions, I tried to persuade him to write these things down, to write an esoteric theory of everything. He repeatedly refused, saying that if he did, quote, the men in white coats would come and take me away, end quote. But I also suspected that for him to publish these things would be to break solemn and terrifying oaths. So in a sense, I have written the book I wanted to write, based in part on the Rosicrucian text he helped me to understand. He guided me, too, to resources to be found in other cultures. So, as well as the Kabbalistic, Hermetic, and Neoplatonic streams that lie relatively close to the surface of Western culture, there are also Sufi elements in this book and ideas flowing from esoteric Hinduism and Buddhism, as well as a few Celtic sources. I have no wish to exaggerate the similarities between these various streams, nor is it within the scope of this book to trace all the ways that these myriad streams have merged, separated, then merged again down the ages, but I will focus on what lies beneath the cultural differences and suggest that these streams carry a unified view of a cosmos that contains hidden dimensions and a view of life as obeying certain mysterious and paradoxical laws. By and large, the different traditions from around the world illumine one another. It is rather wonderful to see how The experiences of a hermit on Mount Sinai in the 2nd century or of a medieval German mystic fit with those of a 20th century Indian Swami. Because esoteric teachings are more deeply hidden in the West, I often use Oriental examples to help understand the secret history of the West. I do not intend to discuss potential conflicts between different traditions. Indian tradition places far more emphasis on reincarnation than the Sufi tradition, which speaks of only a few. So, for the sake of the narrative, I have compromised by including only a small number of reincarnations of famous historical personalities. I have also made cavalier judgments as to which schools of thought and which secret societies draw on authentic tradition. So the Kabbalah, Hermeticism, Sufism, the Templars, the Rosicrucians, esoteric Freemasonry, Martinism, the Theosophy of Madame Blavatsky, and Anthroposophy are included, but Scientology, the Christian Science of Mary Baker Eddy, together with a whole slew of contemporary channeled, quote unquote, material is not. This is not to say that this book shies away from controversy. Previous attempts to identify a perennial philosophy, quote unquote, have tended to come up with collections of platitudes. Quote, we are all the same under the skin, end quote. Love is its own reward, quote unquote, which are difficult to disagree with. To anyone expecting something similarly agreeable, I must apologize in advance. The teaching I will be identifying as common to mystery schools and secret societies from all over the world will outrage many people and fly in the face of common sense. One day my mentor told me I was ready for initiation, that he would introduce me to some people. I'd been looking forward to this moment, but to my surprise, I refused. No doubt fear played a part. I knew by then that many initiation rituals involved altered states of consciousness, even what are sometimes called near-death experiences. But it was partly also because I didn't want to have all this knowledge given to me all of a piece. I wanted to continue enjoying trying to work it out for myself. And neither did I want to take an oath that forbade me to write. This history of the world is structured in the following way. The first 4 chapters will look at what happened in the beginning, quote unquote, as taught by the secret societies, including what is meant in the secret teaching by the expulsion from Eden and the fall. These chapters will aim too to provide an account of the world, the world view of the secret societies, a pair of conceptual spectacles, so readers may the better appreciate what follows. In the following 7 chapters, many figures from myth and legend are treated as historical figures. This is the history of what happened before written records began, as it was taught in the mystery schools and is still taught in the secret societies today. Chapter 8 includes the transition into what is conventionally thought of as the historical period. But the narrative continues to tell stories of monsters and fabulous beasts, of miracles and prophecies and historical figures who conspired with disembodied beings to direct the course of events. I hope that throughout the reader's mind will be pleasurably bent equally by the strange ideas presented and by the revealing of the names of the personalities who have entertained these ideas. I hope, too, that some of the strange claims will strike a chord that many readers will think, yes, that explains why the names of the weeks run in the order they do. That's why the image of the fish, the water carrier, and a serpent-tailed goat are everywhere ascribed constellations that don't really resemble them. That's what we're really commemorating at Halloween. That explains the bizarre confessions of demon worship by the Knights Templar. That is what gives Christopher Columbus the conviction to set out on his insanely perilous voyage. That is why an Egyptian obelisk was erected in New York's Central Park in the late 19th century. That is why Lenin was embalmed. Through all this, the aim is to show that the basic facts of history can be interpreted in a way which is almost completely the opposite of the way we normally understand them. To prove this would of course require a whole library of books, something like the 20 miles of shelves of esoteric and occult literature said to be locked away in the Vatican. But in this single volume, I will show that this alternative, this mirror image view, is a consistent and cogent one with its own logic that has the virtue of explaining areas of human experience that remain inexplicable to the conventional view. I will also cite authorities throughout, providing leads for interested readers to follow. Some of these authorities have worked within the esoteric tradition, others are experts. Their specialist fields of research seem to be to confirm the esoteric worldview, even where I have no way of knowing whether their personal philosophy of life has any spiritual or esoteric dimension. But above all, the point I want to emphasize, I'm asking readers to approach this text in a way to see it as an imaginative exercise. I want the reader to try to imagine what it would feel like to believe the opposite of what we have been brought up to believe. This inevitably involves an altered state of consciousness to some degree or other, which is just as it should be, because at the very heart of all esoteric teaching in all parts of the world lies the belief that higher forms of intelligence can be accessed in altered states. The Western tradition, in particular, has always emphasized the value of imaginative exercises, which involve cultivating and dwelling upon visual images, allowing to sink deep into the mind. They there do their work. So, although this book can be read just as a record of the absurd things people have believed, an epic phantasmagoria, a cacophony of irrational experiences, I hope that by the end some readers will hear some harmonies and perhaps also sense a slight philosophical undertow, which is the suggestion that it may be true. Of course, any good theory which seeks to explain why the world is as it is must also help predict what will happen next, and the last chapter reveals what that will be, always presuming, of course, that the great cosmic plan of the secret societies proves to be successful. This plan will encompass a belief that the great new impulse for the evolution will arise in Russia, that European civilization will collapse, and that finally the flame of true spirituality will be kept burning in America. To help with all the to help with the all important work of the imagination, there are strange and uncanny illustrations integrated throughout, some of which have not previously been seen outside the secret societies. There are also illustrations of some of the most familiar images from world history, the greatest icons of our culture: the Sphinx, Noah's Ark, the Trojan Horse, the Mona Lisa, Hamlet, and the Skull, because all of these are shown to have strange and unexpected meanings according to the secret societies. Lastly, there are illustrations from modern European artists such as Ernst, Klee, and Duchamp, as well as from American outlaws such as David Lynch. Their work is also shown to be steeped in the ancient and secret philosophy. Induce in yourself a different state of mind, and the most famous and familiar histories mean something very different. In fact, if anything in this history is true, then everything your teachers taught you is thrown into question. I suspect this prospect doesn't alarm you. As one of the devotees of the ancient and secret philosophy so memorably put it, you must be mad or you wouldn't have come here. And that's the end of the introduction. And the first chapter is a few pages longer than the introduction. Um, so I'm going to get settled in here a little bit. Um, Not too comfortable. I don't want to get sleepy, but we'll settle in a bit and we'll get right on into it. So, chapter 1: In the beginning, God peers at his reflection, the looking glass universe. Once upon a time, there was no time at all. Time is nothing but a measure of the changing positions of objects in space, and as any scientist, mystic, or madman knows, in the beginning there were no objects in space. For example, a year is a measure of the movement of the Earth around the Sun. A day is the revolving of the Earth on its axis. Since by its own account neither Earth nor Sun existed in the beginning, the authors of the Bible never meant to say that everything was created in 7 days in the usual sense of a day. I've maintained that forever, that a day could have been a billion years. Despite this initial absence of matter, space, and time, something must have happened to get everything started. In other words, something must have happened before there was anything. Since there was no thing when something first happened, it is safe to say this first happening must have been quite different from the sorts of events we regularly account for in terms of the laws of physics. Might it make sense to say this first happening could have been in some ways more like a mental event than a physical event? The idea of mental events generating physical effects may at first seem counterintuitive, but in fact it's something we experience all the time. For example, what happens when I'm struck by an idea such as I just have to reach out and stroke her cheek? Is that a pulse jumps a synapse in my brain, something like an electrical current burns down a nerve in my arm and my hand moves? Can this everyday example tell us anything about the origins of the cosmos? In the beginning, an impulse must have come from somewhere, but where? As children, didn't we all feel wonder when we first saw crystals precipitating in the bottom of a solution as if an impulse were squeezing out of one dimension into the next? In this history, we shall see how, for many of the world's most brilliant individuals, the birth of the universe, the mysterious transition from from no matter to matter, has been explained in just such a way. They have envisaged an impulse squeezing out of another dimension into this one, and they have conceived of this other dimension as the mind of God. While you are still on the threshold, and before you risk wasting any more time on this history, I must make it plain that I am going to try to persuade you to consider something which may be all right by a mystic or a madman, but which a scientist will not like. A scientist will not like it at all. To today's most advanced thinkers, academics like Richard Dawkins, the Charles Simonyi professor, and the public understanding of science at Oxford, and other militant materialists who regulate them and maintain the scientific worldview, the quote unquote mind of God is no better than the idea of a white haired old man up above the clouds. It is the same mistake, they say, that children and primitive tribes make when they assume God must be like them, the anthropomorphic fallacy. Even if we allowed that God might conceivably exist, they say, why on earth should he, quote unquote, be like us? Why should his mind be in any way like ours? The fact is that they're right. Of course, there is no reason at all unless it's the other way around. In other words, the only reason why God's mind might be like ours is if ours was made to be like his. That is, if God made us in his image. And this is what happens in this book, because in this history, everything is the other way around. And we have a picture. Alice enters the other way round universe. So I will bring that picture up and show you. Looks like almost like an old block picture, like, wood block in some ways. Share screen. To me it does. I may be just talking about my ass, but to me it does a little bit. There's the clock. Can't tell what that's supposed to be. But anyway, back to it. Everything here is upside down and inside out. In the pages that follow, you will be invited to think the last things that the people who guard and maintain the consensus want you to think. You will be tempted to think forbidden thoughts and taste philosophies that the intellectual leaders of our age believe to be heretical, stupid, and mad. Let me quickly reassure you that I'm not going to try to embroil you in academic debate, to try to persuade you by philosophical argument that any of these forbidden ideas are true. The formal arguments for and against can be found in the standard academic works referenced in the notes. But what I am going to do is ask you to stretch your imagination. I want you to imagine what it would feel like to see the world and its history from a point of view that is about as far away from the one you've been taught as is possible to get. Our most advanced thinkers would be horrified and would certainly advise you against toying with these ideas in any way at all, let alone dwelling on them for the time it will take to read this book. There has been a concerted attempt to erase from the universe all memory, every last trace of these ideas. Today's intellectual elite believes that if we let these ideas slip back into the imagination, even briefly, we risk being dragged back into an aboriginal or atavistic form of consciousness, a mental slime from which we have had to struggle over many millennia to evolve. So, in this story, what did happen before time? What was the primal mental event? Is this story God reflected on itself? Or in this story, God reflected on himself. He looked, as it were, into an imaginary mirror and saw the future. He imagined beings very like himself. He imagined free, creative beings capable of loving so intelligently and thinking so lovingly that they could transform themselves and others of their kind in their innermost being. They could expand their minds to embrace the totality of the cosmos, and in the depths of their hearts they could discern, too, the secrets of its subtlest workings. Sometimes the love in them was almost snuffed out, but at other times they found deeper happiness the other side of despair, and sometimes, too, they found meaning the other side of madness. Putting yourself into God's position involves imagining that you are staring at your reflection in a mirror. You're willing to image you're willing the image of yourself you see there to come alive and take on its own independent life. As we shall see in the following chapters, in the looking glass history taught by the secret societies, this is exactly what God did. His reflections, humans, gradually and in stages, forming and achieving independent life, nurtured by him, guided and prompted by him over very long periods. Today's scientists will tell you that in the hour of your greatest anguish, there is no point in crying out to the heavens with an expression of your deepest, most heartfelt feelings, because you will find no answering resonance there. The stars can show you only indifference. The human task is to grow up, to mature, to learn to come to terms with this indifference. Okay, and we have a picture. It's captioned a 19th century depiction of the Kabbalistic idea of God reflecting on himself. So I'll bring that up and show you that. So God reflecting on himself. And he has what looks to be a star. It's very light, but here, right between his eyes, we have, it looks like Star of David, a hexagram. Um, the oval here around the eyes might be the fish symbol, I'm guessing, or something similar. Um, there's a triangle coming down to the point of his nose. Interesting. And then I'm a bit rusty on my Hebrew, but that looks like a Hebrew letter to me, or maybe not. Maybe it's, I don't know. Maybe it is. Like I said, I'm pretty rusty on that, and I never really learned it. I just, okay. And I might as well, since I already brought this up, I'll show you this kind of odd Mona Lisa. It almost looked like she's got a mustache here. So anyway, let's see what he has to say about that picture. The universe that this book describes is different because it was made with humankind in mind. In this history, the universe is anthropocentric. Very every Let me start that over. In this history, the universe is anthropocentric. I still can't get it out. Anthropocentric. Every single particle of it is straining directed towards humankind. This universe has nurtured us through the millennia, cradled us, helped the unique thing that is human consciousness to evolve, and guided each of us as individuals towards the great moments in our lives. When you cry out, the universe turns toward you in sympathy. When you approach one of life's great crossroads, the whole universe holds its breath to see which way you'll choose. Scientists may talk of the mystery and wonder of the universe, of every single particle in it being connected to every other particle by the pull of gravity. They may point out amazing facts, such as that each and every one of us contains millions of atoms that were once in the body of Julius Caesar. They may say we are stardust, but only in the slightly disappointing sense that the atoms we are made of were forged from hydrogen in stars that exploded long before our solar system was formed. Because the important point is this: however they deck it out with the rhetoric of mystery and wonder, theirs is a universe of blind force. Okay, so there is a very long caption for that Mona Lisa picture. LHOOQ Manifeste Dada by Marcel Duchamp, reproduced in the book Surrealism and Painting by André Breton. The notion that the physical world responds to our inner desires and fears is a difficult and perhaps somewhat troubling one that we will keep returning to in order to try to understand it better. In 1933, André Breton, a devotee of the philosophy of the secret societies, said something very wonderful that has illuminated art and sculpture ever since, and never more so than in the case of the ready-mades of Duchamp. Any piece of flotsam or jetsam within our grasp should be considered as a precipitate of our desire, end quote. And that's the end. That was all the caption. Um, it doesn't really tell me much more about the picture, but okay. Uh, in the scientific universe, matter came from before mind. Mind is an accident of matter, inessential and extraneous to matter, as one scientist went so far as to describe it, a disease of matter, quote unquote. On the other hand, in the mind before matter universe that this book describes, the connection between mind and matter is much more intimate. It is a living, dynamic connection. Everything in this universe is alive and conscious to some degree, responding sensitively and intelligently to our deepest, subtlest needs. That's a bordering on animism. In this mind before matter universe, not only did matter emerge from the mind of God, but it was created in order to provide the conditions in which the human mind would be possible. The human mind is still the focus of the cosmos, nurturing it and responding to its needs. Matter is moved by human minds, perhaps not to the same extent, but in the same kind of way that it is moved by the mind of God. In 1935, the Austrian physicist Erwin Schrödinger. Actually, before I go on, I just had a random thought about that. The human mind, let's see, the human mind is, matter is moved by human minds, perhaps not to the same extent, but in the same kind of way that it is moved by the mind of God. That actually brought the thought to mind. Matter is moved by our mind. Okay, if you equate the mind with the brain, at least for this example, the brain tells my muscles to move this cup. This cup is matter, therefore I have moved matter with my mind. Just a random thought. But I wanted to get it out there. In 1935, the Austrian physicist Erwin Schrödinger formulated his famous theoretical experiment, Schrödinger's cat, to describe how events change when they are observed. In effect, he was taking the secret society's teachings about everyday experience and applying them to the subatomic realm. At some point in childhood, we all wonder whether tree falling really makes any sound if it takes place in a remote forest where no one is there to hear it. Surely, we say, a sound not heard by anyone can't properly be described as a sound. The secret societies teach that something like this speculation is true. According to them, a tree only falls over in a forest, however remote, so that someone somewhere at some time is affected by it. Nothing happens anywhere in the cosmos except in intersection with the human mind. In Schrodinger's experiment, a cat sits in a box with radioactive material that has a 50% chance of killing the cat. Both the cat's being dead and its being alive remain 50% probabilities suspended in time, as it were, until we open the box to see what's inside, and only then does the actual event, the death or survival of the cat, happen. By looking at the cat, we kill or save it. The secret societies have always held that the everyday world behaves in a similar way. In the universe of the secret societies, a coin flipped in strict laboratory conditions will still land heads up in 50% of cases and tails up in 50% of cases, according to the laws of probability. However, these laws will remain invariable only in laboratory conditions. In other words, the laws of probability only apply when all human subjectivity has been deliberately excluded. In the normal run of things, when human happiness and hopes for self-fulfillment depend on the outcome of the roll of the dice, then the laws of probability are bent. Then deeper laws come into play. These days, we are all comfortable with the fact that our emotional states affect our bodies, and further, that deep-seated emotions can cause long-term, deep-seated changes either to heal or to harm. Psychosomatic effects. But in the universe that this book describes, our emotional states directly affect matter outside our bodies too. In this psychosomatic universe, the behavior of physical objects in space is directly affected by mental states without our having to do anything about it. We can move matter by the way we look at it. In Chronicles Volume 1, Bob Dylan's recently published memoirs, he writes about what has to happen if an individual is to change the times in which he or she lives. To do this, quote, "You've got to have power and dominion over the spirits. I have done it once," end quote. He writes that such individuals are able to, quote, "see into the heart of things, the truth of things, not metaphorically either, but really see, like seeing into metal and making it melt, see it for what it is, with hard words and vicious insight," end quote. Note that he emphasizes he is not talking metaphorically. He is talking directly and quite literally about a powerful ancient wisdom preserved in the secret societies, a wisdom in which the great artists, writers, and thinkers who have forged our culture are steeped. At the heart of this wisdom is the belief that the deepest springs of our mental life are also the deepest springs of the physical world, because in the universe of the secret societies, all chemistry is psychochemistry, and the ways in which the physical content of the universe responds to the human psyche are described by deeper and more powerful laws than the laws of material science. It is important to realize that by these deeper laws are meant more than the mere runs of luck that gamblers experience or accidents seeming to happen in sequences of three. No, by these laws, the secret societies meant laws that weave themselves into the warp and weft of each individual life at the most intimate level, as well as the great and complex patterns of providential order that have shaped the history of the world. The theory of this book is that history has a deeper structure, that events we usually explain in terms of politics, economics, or natural disaster can more profitably be seen in terms of other, more spiritual patterns. All the upside down, inside out, other way around thinking of the secret societies, all that is bizarre and mind bending in what follows, stems from the belief that mind preceded matter. We have almost no evidence to go on when we decide what we believe happened at the beginning of the time, but the choice we make has massive implications for our understanding of the way the world works. If we believe that matter came before mind, if you believe that matter came before mind, you have to explain how a chance coming together of chemicals created consciousness, which is difficult. If, on the other hand, you believe that matter is precipitated by a cosmic mind, you have the equally difficult problem of explaining how, of providing a working model. From the priests of the Egyptian temples to today's secret societies, from Pythagoras to Rudolf Steiner, the great Austrian initiate of the late 19th to early 20th century, this model has always been conceived of as a series of thoughts emanating from the cosmic mind. Pure mind to begin with, these thought emanations later became a sort of proto-matter, energy that becomes increasingly dense, then becomes matter so ethereal that it is finer than gas, without particles of any kind. Eventually, the emanations become gas, then liquid, and finally solids. Kevin Warwick is professor of cybernetics at Reading University and one of the world's leading creators of artificial intelligence, working in friendly rivalry with his contemporaries at MIT in the United States. He has made robots able to interact with their environment, learn and adjust their behavior accordingly. These robots exhibit a level of intelligence that matches that of the lower animals such as bees. Within 5 years, he says, robots will have achieved the level of intelligence of cats, and in 10 years they will be at least as intelligent as humans. He is also in the process of engineering a new generation of robotic computers he expects to be able to design and manufacture other computers, each level generating the lesser level beneath it. Robots building robots. Okay, so we have another picture, the caption for which is and it's a long one, an alchemical engraving from the Mutus Liber, published anonymously in 1677. In alchemy, the precipitation of the morning dew is a symbol of the emanation of the cosmic mind into the realm of matter. As the Kabbalah puts it, the Ancient of Days shakes his shaggy head, and a dew of divine white light falls. More particularly, dew is a symbol of the spiritual forces that work on the conscience during the night. This is why a bad conscience may give us a sleepless night. Here, initiates are seen collecting and working on the dew, in other words, reaping the benefits upon waking of the spiritual exercises they performed when they went to bed. Okay, so let me go ahead and bring that picture up. Um, Show you. So they are. Damn, get out of the way. Um, yeah. Looks like they're wringing something out. So I they've gathered the dew in a cloth. Oh, so these cloths sitting out here are catching the dew all through here. This one, there are 5 of them there, and then they're wringing it out into a basin. Okay. According to the cosmologists of the ancient world and the secret societies, emanations from the cosmic mind should be understood in the same way as working downwards in a hierarchy from the higher and more powerful and pervasive particles to the narrower and more particular, each level creating and directing the one below it. These emanations have also always been thought of as, in some sense, personified, as being in some sense also intelligent. When I saw Kevin Warwick present his findings to his peers at the Royal Institute in 2001, He was criticized by some for suggesting that his robots were intelligent and so by implication conscious. But what is undeniably true is that these robots' brains grow in something like an organic way. They form something very like personalities, interact with other robots, and make choices beyond anything that has been programmed into them. Kevin argued that while his robots might not have consciousness with all the characteristics of human consciousness, neither do dogs. Dogs are conscious in a doggy way, and his robots, he said, are conscious in a robotic way. Of course, in some ways, such as the ability to make massive mathematical calculations instantly, robots display a consciousness that is superior to our own consciousness. We might think of the consciousness of the emanations from the cosmic mind in similar terms. We might also be reminded of the Tibetan spiritual masters who are said to be able to form a type of thoughts called tulpas by intense concentration and visualization. These beings, we might call them thought beings, attain some sort of independent life and go off and do their master's bidding. Similarly, Paracelsus, the 16th century Swiss magus, wrote about what he called an aquastor, a being formed by the power of concentrated imagination which may obtain a life of its own, of his or her own, and in special circumstances become visible, even tangible. At the lowest level of the hierarchy, according to the ancient and secret doctrine in all cultures, these emanations, these thought beings from the cosmic mind, interweave so tightly that they create the appearance of solid matter. Today, if you wanted to find language to describe this strange phenomenon, you might choose to look to quantum mechanics. But in the secret societies, the interweaving of invisible forces to create the appearance of the material world has always been conceived of as a net of light and color, or, to use an alchemical term, the matrix. Top scientist asks if life all just a dream. This headline ran in the Sunday Times in February 2005. The story was that Sir Martin Rees, Britain's astronomer royal, was saying, quote, over a few decades, computers have evolved from being able to simulate only very simple patterns, to being able to create virtual worlds with a lot of detail. If that trend were to continue, then we can imagine computers which will be able to simulate worlds perhaps even as complicated as the one we think we're living in. This raises the philosophical question, could we ourselves be in such a simulation, and could what we think is the universe be some sort of vault of heaven rather than the real thing? In a sense, we could ourselves be the creations within that simulation. End quote. The wider story was that leading scientists around the world are becoming increasingly fascinated by the extraordinary degree of fine tuning that has been necessary for us to evolve, and this is making them question what is really real. As well as these recent developments in science, novels, and movies have gone. What? Sorry, I'm going to start that sentence over. As well as these recent developments in science, novels and movies have gone some way to acclimatizing us to the idea that what we routinely take to be reality might be a virtual reality. Okay, now it made sense. Philip K. Dick, who was perhaps the first writer to see these ideas in pop culture, was steeped in initiatic wisdom regarding altered states and parallel dimensions. His novel, his novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, was filmed as Blade Runner. Other films with this theme include Minority Report, also based on a book by Dick, Total Recall, The Truman Show, and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. But the biggest has been The Matrix. In The Matrix, menacing shade-wearing villains police the virtual world we call reality in order to control us for their own nefarious purposes. In part, at least, this is an accurate reflection of the teachings of the mystery schools and secret societies, although all the beings that live behind the veil of illusion are part of the hierarchies of emanations from the mind of God. Some display a disturbing moral ambivalence. These are the same beings that the peoples of the ancient world experienced as their gods, spirits, and demons. The fact that some leading scientists are again beginning to see possibilities in this very ancient way of looking at the cosmos is an encouraging sign, although modern sensibility has little patience with metaphysics, with what might look like high minded recherche. I'm not sure what that is. Recherche abstractions piled up on each other. The cosmology of the ancient world was, as any fair historian of ideas will allow, a magnificent philosophical machine. It is, in its account of interlocking, evolving dimensions, the clashing, morphing, and intermingling of great systems in its scale, complexity, and awesome explanatory power, it it rivals that of modern science. Some of these sentences are difficult to read properly. We cannot simply say that physics has replaced metaphysics and made it redundant. There is a key difference between these systems, which is that they are explaining different things. Modern science explains how the universe comes to be as it is. Ancient philosophy of that kind we will be explore of the kind we will be exploring in this book explains how our experience of the universe comes to be as it is. For science, the great miracle to be explained is the physical universe. For esoteric philosophy, the great miracle is human consciousness. Scientists are fascinated by the extraordinary series of balances between various sets of factors that has been necessary in order to make life on Earth possible. They talk in terms of balances between heat and cold, wetness and dryness, the Earth being so far from the Sun and no further, the Sun being at a particular stage of evolution, neither hotter nor colder, at a more fundamental level. In order for matter to cohere, the forces of gravity and electromagnetism must each be of a particular degree, neither stronger nor weaker, and so on. Looked at from the point of view of esoteric philosophy, we can begin to see that an equally extraordinary series of balances has been necessary to make our subjective consciousness what it is. In other words, to give our experience the structure it has. By balances, quote unquote, I'm talking about more than having a balanced mind in the colloquial sense. That is to say, of having emotions which are healthy and not too strong. I'm talking of something deeper, something essential. What, for example, is needed to make possible the internal narratives, the collection of stories we string together to form our basic sense of self? The answer is, of course, memory. It is only by remembering what I did yesterday that I can identify myself as the person who did these things. The key point is that it is a particular degree of memory that is needed, neither stronger nor weaker. The Italian novelist Italo Calvino, one of the many modern writers who have followed the ancient and mystical philosophies, puts it precisely. Quote, memory has to be strong enough to enable us to act without forgetting what we wanted to do, to learn without ceasing to be the same person, but it also has to be weak enough to allow us to keep moving into the future. End quote. Other balances are necessary in order for us to be able to think freely, to weave thoughts around that central sense of self. We have to be able to perceive the outside world through the senses, but it is equally important for us not to be overwhelmed by sensations which could otherwise occupy all our mental space. Then we could neither reflect nor imagine. That this balance holds is as extraordinary in its way as, for example, the fact that our planet is neither too far from nor too close to the sun. We also have the ability to move our point of consciousness around our interior life like a cursor on a computer screen. As a result of this, we have the freedom to choose what to think about. If we did not have the right balance of attachment and detachment from our interior impulses, as well as from our perceptions of the outside world, then at this very moment you would have no freedom to choose to take your attention away from the page you're looking at now, and no freedom to think about anything else. And so I don't know if we're actually in an ad or not. It's not showing up on my other device. Oh, there it goes. So now apparently we are in an ad. I don't know why they're so weird. It takes so long for them to show up. I know there's a little delay between what I'm seeing on OBS and what shows up on Twitch, but sometimes it's minutes, which is really weird. Okay, so I'm just going to start that paragraph over when we come back, which it looks like will be in about 10, 12 seconds. And we're getting close to the end. I am on page 14 of 18 for this chapter. So, all right, it looks like we are back. So, I'm going to start that paragraph over. We also have the ability to move our point of consciousness around our interior life, like a cursor on a computer screen. As a result of this, we have the freedom to choose what to think about. If we did not have the right balance of attachment and detachment from our interior impulses, as well as from our perceptions of the outside world, then at this very moment you would have no freedom to choose to take your attention away from the page you're looking at now, and no freedom to think about anything else. And so, crucially, if the most fundamental conditions of human consciousness were not characterized by this set of exceptionally fine balances, it would not be possible for us to exercise free thought or free will. When it comes to the very highest points of human experience, what the American psychologist Abraham Maslow usefully called peak experiences, even finer balances are necessary. For example, we may be required to make decisions at the great turning points of our lives. Again, it is the common, if not universal, human experience that if we try to work out what is the right thing to do with our lives using all our intelligence, if we work at it with a good and whole heart, if we exercise patience and humility, we can just discern the right thing to do. And once we have made the right decision, the chosen course of action will probably require all the willpower we are capable of, perhaps for just as long as we are able to bear it, if we are able to complete it successfully. This is right at the core of what it means to experience life as a human being. There is no inevitability about our consciousness having the structure that makes possible these freedoms, these opportunities to choose to do the right thing, to grow and to develop into good, perhaps even heroic people, unless you believe in providence, that is to say, unless you believe that it was meant to be. Human consciousness is therefore a sort of miracle. If today we tend to overlook this, the ancients were stirred by the wonder of it. As we are about to see, their intellectual leaders tracked subtle changes in human consciousness with as much diligence as modern scientists track changes in the physical environment. Their account of history, with its mythical and supernatural happenings, was an account of how human consciousness evolved. Modern science tries to enforce a narrow, reductive view of our consciousness. It tries to convince us of the unreality of elements, even quite persistent elements in experience, that it cannot explain. What? What do you mean it's not coming through? Oh. Okay, I was just told that nothing's coming through. All right, I don't get that. Okay. My audio says it's just fine. Here it is. I can hear myself. Now, if I just needed to, re- I don't know. Okay, it just glitched out for some reason. So, all right. I don't know how far back to go. I guess I'll just start this page over. I don't know. Um, yeah, I'll just start this page over. Modern science tries to enforce a narrow, reductive view of our consciousness. It tries to convince us of the unreality of elements, even quite persistent elements in experience that it cannot explain. This These include the shadowy power of prayer, premonitions, and the feeling of being stared at, the evidence of mind reading, out of body experiences, meaningful coincidences, and other things swept under the carpet by modern science. And much, much more importantly, science in this reductive mood denies the universal human experience that life has a meaning. Some scientists even deny that the question of whether den- sorry, some scientists even deny that the question of whether or not life has meaning is worth asking. We will see in the course of this history that many of the most intelligent people who have ever lived have become devotees of esoteric philosophy. I believe it may even be the case that every intelligent person has tried to find out about it at some time. It is a natural human impulse to wonder if life has a meaning, and esoteric philosophy represents the richest, deepest, most concentrated body of thought on this subject. Before we embark on our narrative, therefore, it is vital that we apply one more sharp philosophical distinction to the softer edge of modern scientific thought. Sometimes things go wrong and life seems pointless. But then at other times, our lives do seem to have meaning. For example, life sometimes seems to have taken a wrong turn. We fail an exam, lose a job, or a love affair ends. But then we find our true métier. I don't know, it's a French word, and I probably butchered it, or true love as a result of this seeming wrong turn. Or it happens that someone decides against boarding a plane, which then crashes. If something like this happens, we may feel as if someone up there, quote unquote, is looking after us, that our footsteps have been guided. We may have a heightened sense of the precariousness of life. How easily things could have turned out differently had it not been for an almost imperceptible, perhaps otherworldly nudge. Similarly, with the down to earth, science oriented part of ourselves, we may see a coincidence as a chance coming together of related events, but sometimes, deep down, we suspect that a coincidence is not a matter of chance at all. In coincidences, we sometimes feel we catch a hint, albeit an elusive one, of a deep pattern of meaning hidden behind the muddle of everyday experience. And sometimes people find that just when all hope seems lost, happiness is discovered, the other side of despair, or that inside hatred hides the growing germ of love. For reasons we'll look at later, questions of happiness are these days closely connected with notions of sexual love, so that it is often the experience of falling in love that gives us the sense that this was meant to be, quote unquote. Recently, leading scientists have been widely quoted as boasting that science is on the brink of discovering the explanation for or the meaning of everything in life and the universe. This is usually in relation to string theory, a theory that they say shortly to be formulated of all the forces of nature, which will combine the laws of gravity with the physics of the quantum world. We will then be able to relate the reasonable laws that govern objects we can sense with the very different behavior of phenomena in the subatomic realm. Once this has been formulated, we will understand everything there is to be understood about the structure, origin, and future of the cosmos. We will have accounted for everything there is because they say there is nothing else. Before we can learn the secrets of the initiates and begin to understand their strange beliefs, our history about history, it's important to be clear about the distinction between meaning, quote unquote, as it is used in connection with the questions about the meaning of life and meaning as scientists use it. A boy arranges to meet his girlfriend for a date, but she stands him up. He's hurt and angry. He wants to understand the painful thing that's happened to him. When he tracks her down, he interrogates her. His repeated question is, why? Because I missed my bus, she says. Because I was late leaving work. Because I was distracted and didn't notice the time. Because I'm unhappy about something. And so he presses and presses until he gets what he's after, sort of. Because I don't want to see you anymore. When we ask why, it could be taken in two ways. Either as in the girl's first evasive answers, as meaning the same as how. That is to say, requiring answers which give an account of a sequence or of cause and effect, of atom knocking against atom, or alternatively, why can be taken in the way the boy wanted to be answered, which is a matter of trying to winkle out intention. Similarly, when we ask about the meaning of life and the universe, we're not really asking how it came about in the cause and effect sense of how the right elements and conditions came together to form matter, stars, planets, organic matter, and so on. We're asking about the intention behind it all. So the big why questions, why life, why the universe, as a matter of quite elementary philosophical distinction, cannot be answered by scientists, or more accurately, not by scientists acting in their capacity as scientists. If we ask, why are we here, we may be fobbed off with answers which, like the girl's early answers, are perfectly valid, in the sense of being grammatically correct answers to the question, but which leave a twist of disappointment in the pit of the stomach because they don't answer the question in the way that deep down we want it answered. The fact is that we all have a deep seated, perhaps ineradicable longing for such questions to be answered at the level of intention. The scientists who don't grasp this distinction, however brilliant they are as scientists, are philosophical morons. Obviously, we can choose to give parts of our lives purpose and meaning. If I choose to play soccer, then kicking the ball into the back of the net means a goal. But our lives as a whole, from birth to death, cannot have meaning without a mind that existed beforehand to give it meaning. The same is true of the universe. So, when we hear scientists talk about the universe as meaningful, wonderful, or mysterious, we should bear in mind that they may be using these words with a certain amount of intellectual dishonesty. An aesthetic universe can only be meaningful, wonderful, or mysterious in a secondary and rather disappointing sense, in the same sense that a stage conjurer is said to be magic. And really, when it comes to considering the great questions of life and death, all the questions of science are little more than difficult and long winding ways of saying we don't know. Today, we are encouraged to put aside the big questions of life and death. Why are we here? What is the meaning of life? Such questions are strictly meaningless, we are told. Just get on with it. And so we lose some of the sense of how strange it is to be alive. This book has been written in the belief that something valuable is in danger of being snuffed out altogether, and that as a result, we are less alive than we used to be. I am suggesting that if we look at the basics of the human condition from a different angle, I hate that term, human condition, we may appreciate that science doesn't really know as much as it claims to know, that it fails to address what is deepest and highest in human experience. In the next chapter, we will begin to imagine ourselves into the minds of the initiates of the ancient world and to see the world from their perspective. We will consider ancient wisdom we have forgotten and see that from its perspective, even those things which modern science encourages us to think of as most solidly, reliably true are really just a matter of interpretation, little more than a trick of the light. And that is actually the end of the chapter, but he ends it with a picture that I'm sure we've all seen, a prescriptive picture which may be seen, I'm actually not, as either a witch or a young woman in a feathered hat, depending on your predisposition. I actually see both. I've never had a problem seeing both. I've seen this picture many, many, many times. And I immediately saw both. So I don't, whatever. So here it is. If you've seen it before, I'm sure you've probably seen it before. Um, and hopefully you're seeing at least one of them, either the young girl with the feather or the old woman. I never heard her described necessarily as a witch, but okay. And if you're not seeing it, then here's the girl. Here's her feather, her hair. This is her jaw, her neck with a necklace, and her out to her shoulder. If you're looking at it for the old woman, then this is like a head covering, her hair sticking out. This is her nose, her mouth, and her chin. Just in case you're just mind doesn't work that way. All right, so that is it for this reading. Let's oh, the next chapter is going to be short. I'll probably end up doing 2 chapters next time. So our next chapter for this coming Tuesday is a short walk into the ancient woods, imagining ourselves into the minds of the ancients. So, all right, let's see who we have around. We've got Hot Dog, Raw Dog, and that's it. That's the only person I follow that's on. And he's playing Dracula X. I've never seen that movie. That game. So give me just a minute. I'll get us on over there, and I will see you in just a minute.
Feeling shattered skies, watching teary blue eyes, wonder where I might find some peace of mind. Not nights like I've had, but more sophisticated into love relations. I'm assembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places. I'm giving up. So it's in my head. So tell me it's not happening. Tell me it's not happening. So Sound